Hi, this is Jeremy, CTO and co-founder of the United Manufacturing Hub, and with me is Josef Waltl, founder and CEO of Software-Defined Automation. Hi, Josef.
Hi, Jeremy.
Yeah, maybe to get started and for the listeners to get to know you, what is it that you do in your spare time?
Normally in my spare time, I try to get away from the computer, spend time on the road, cycle, be in the mountains. No surprise, I'm Austrian, so that's pretty in the genes, I think. Other than that, I'm really interested in where technology is going.
Mhm.
Not necessarily from an automation perspective, but in general, listen to podcasts, reading books. What's the next wave? Yeah.
What is something now independent from the topic where we're working in? What's something that currently interests you the most?
Not surprisingly, I also asked myself, what can generative AI do right
Mhm.
now? It's pretty powerful, I also have to say, and admit it struck me bit by surprise how powerful this model's got. I would have expected this in a couple of years. And currently, what I would like to understand is if we pair those large language models with semantic models, what can we do in certain domains?
What do you mean with semantic models?
Semantic models is like building up a model what certain elements mean in a certain domain, like really providing context to just pure text,
Mm.
and then have those
Mhm.
text-based models kind of combine it and then deliver better answers to very domain-specific questions.
Now, getting back to topic, you've had quite the impressive journey regarding your job. So you started by doing a PhD. I think it was like during the Siemens time, if I remember correctly, and now you founded a company. What led you down to this path where you are at the moment?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know, it's impressive. Let me kind of really tell you a story who I am. And actually, I'm a industrial electronics guy. In Austria, you can do your A levels and also kind of really get a trade. And it's industrial electronics, industrial automation. I then studied computer science, a bit business, and then, as you said, went to Siemens and quickly, surprisingly or not surprisingly, landed in the industrial software space, where I helped to kind of build up what's now very impressive in a portfolio of industrial software, CAD systems, simulation systems, MES systems, but also on the industrial control side, where I worked in product management and a variety of other support functions to really kind of shape that portfolio for certain areas of the world. I was then asked by AWS to help build the partner ecosystem
Mhm.
for industrial software, like basically from Autodesk to Mitsubishi Electric, which is also from CAD to PLCs by Microsoft to product management in the Azure Industrial IoT, Edge AI, and Edge Analytics. And the whole string, basically, if you so will, is I came from industrial automation, industrial software, and also got a glimpse of what's possible in the cloud and modern software development practices. And this is also where kind of the idea of what we do at software-defined automation stems from.
So you have now experience in all the automation and you know the AWS side. Where do you see the industry is heading? How do you see the factory of the future?
So let me answer a bit on a high level and then come down to
Mhm.
the specific level. So what I see is that especially when it comes to OT, we are kind of in a parallel universe where up from where
Mhm.
microprocessors were developed very quickly, the relay control logic was replaced by microprocessor based control logic, which ultimately led to the advent of programmable logic controllers, PLCs, robot controllers, and so on. And then that path kind of went forward, and then the IT went from microcontrollers to hosts to PCs to Intel-based data centers to the cloud. And in the software, it went from like monolithic systems to like modern software development practices, ultimately to microservice architectures. And what I see mainly in the interconnection was actually chips getting ever better and the PLCs got ever better. These are
Mhm.
computers that are optimized for durability, reliability, and real-time control. But what has not proliferated is all the best practices. What has not proliferated that if the PLC gets always stronger and better, the programs get always bigger that are on that PLC. That's the opposite of what we've seen right now. I'm not saying the microservices are the silver bullet for everything. What we've seen is that you can write once, deploy anywhere in modern software development. What you can see is that the hardware, actually the compute, is like consumable in the cloud, that it can be ramped up and can be ramped down. What we see is all the developer tech, DevOps, continuous integration and deployment. That's stuff that has not found its way to the degree that we see it moving forward in IT, in OT. And back to your question, what we see is we see extremely powerful, really, really capable systems. They are also enriched a bit by, you can load an edge module into a PLC. But what we do not see is we do not see a paradigm shift to like say, okay, that's a path we cannot move forward. Or I would say we are currently at that moment of a paradigm shift. Yeah? So I think we will see still some innovation in the existing technology. I think we are really on the brink of kind of, I always jokingly say that's the last domain that has not been conquered. I think now is the time where that either is addressed or the challenges like labor shortage of skilled automation engineers, like need to ramp up certain types of productions, be it battery, be it other productions that we need to bring back to Europe and to the US, will not work.
I once talked with a person from OT. He said, I'm not saying like I agree or disagree with his statement, but he said that why should we as OT go near to IT? We as OT, we're very unflexible. The IT people they're flexible. They should come to us. They should adjust to us. What would you say to that person?
First of all, I think there is some truth to it because OT deals with physics. Once you are with physics, you are not as flexible. So just plainly saying everything you do in IT is applicable in OT, it's definitely not wrong. I would not necessarily agree to the definitiveness of that statement. I'd like to rather approach things in first principle thinking. So what's the ultimate problem that you have, and which tools do you have available in technology, IT or OT, and then build a new system. This is, by the way, why we put a lot of focus on immediate benefit in what we build. That means, first of all, you have a PLC. PLCs are hard to manage. We build a management system of PLCs where you can deploy, you can put all your passwords in, they are connected. You know exactly what the files are. Files, I mean, the programs, which are parts of a proprietary files that are defined, the file structure is defined by the specific PLC vendor normally. That's the world where the OT engineers are. So in that regard, we ultimately agree by building a system that catches the OT engineer, the automation engineer, the PLC programmer in their world and brings immediate benefit and gradually see what's applicable and what can we bring in. I'm also of the view that it does not bring a lot of value to just bring concepts in that do not fit the work. I'll give you an example. It's especially in the field, once you are with service technicians, it's not that they work in, like, say, 2 pizza teams. You can see that I came from Amazon, like collaborate a lot. Very often it's not required in the first place to kind of have branches and then do merging meetings and whatever. It's just required to understand what is the latest version that someone actually deployed. Yeah? In that regard, implicitly we do it. We work again towards that statement. Yeah? I would not say it's either or. Yeah? It's like, what can we really deploy? And super, super important is what brings value now? Because I think the whole industry 4.0 movement, there have been a lot of bubbles that have not materialized, where we believe that time is over. Yeah? No one in OT, especially, where people ultimately get fired if production stands still for too long. Yeah? No one wants to take that risk, and we take this very serious. So for us, the automation engineer and the automation and the PLC programmer is the ultimate user of our software, and we try to be as useful coming from right now, from day one.
You already started explain a little bit what you do, like with Manage PLC. Maybe I think the readers can themselves look at your website, softwaredefinedautomation.io. How would you explain it in your own words? How would you explain it to them what you do? What's your vision and what's your mission?
Actually, let me break it down for you. The vision is very simple. We could always also say it's obvious, not genius. Yeah, we basically do to the computers in the factories what
Mhm.
the cloud system providers did to the computers in the data centers. So also for the viewers that are not 100% familiar with, in the 90s, early 2000s in data centers, people walked with DVDs and CDs into the data center and flashed SAP systems and operating systems and so on. And that's the case right now in factories. So there is a variety of technologies. So it's not necessarily always the case, but the majority that we see with our customers, people are with laptops where Windows applications are installed in plethora of different versions. They go to the electrical cabinet where these computers sit. They plug in, they change the code. There is very little oversight on what has been deployed. Also, there is a huge dependency on these specific computers. So our vision is turn factories into software systems. Very
Mhm.
simple, very plain. Like the cloud turned data centers and IT infrastructure into a pure software system. So you can script data centers and pull them up. Yeah? And we believe that has some value for the reasons that are laid out, like geopolitically, like demographics, and so on. And one important thing is people want to have modern tools. I think we have in all Western economies a shrinking number of people with a certain qualification that we need. We have the responsibility to build the best tools that attracts talent. We take this very, very serious. Looking at software-defined automation, turning factories into software systems, the vision is simple. How to do it is not so simple, actually, we learned. So where do you start? First of all, these industrial computers will not go away anytime soon for good reasons. They're extremely reliable. They are cost efficient. They do real time extremely well. Yeah? So very deterministic. And as a matter of fact, over 90% of the factories are there, and factories are there for 15 to 30 years before they get an overhaul. So if you want to have an impact, you need to manage the existing PLCs. This is what we call PLC ops. Basically, we build a SaaS tool that is a management system for PLCs where you can connect all of your PLCs to the cloud. You know all this data of the PLCs. You then also get the program that's deployed linked to the PLC. You know what is deployed. You can do a backup. We also allow to open the engineering system that often has a myriad of different versions that are not 100% compatible in a browser. So from having a brick ruggedized laptop where I need to be in the factory, you can also kind of, if you are out of your shift as automation engineer, just look it up on your tablet and help your colleague on the phone by directly going into that compute instance, actually, which is, if it's as principle thinking, essentially is. That's point one. We call this PLC ops, and
Mhm.
that helps to get away of like all the heavy lifting and shifting. Yeah, like the non-necessary productive work. We do this across different vendors of PLCs. That's also interesting to understand. There is also part of these tools from proprietary vendors, which then have like a complete system. But as a matter of fact, if you are a manufacturing company, you buy machines from different vendors, and either you force them to take your PLC technology, which is not
Mhm.
always possible, or you end up with a SOO basically. And
Mhm.
because these systems are not so standardized, we eliminate the SOO. We make the management of these different technologies much simpler. We can do Siemens, we can do Rockwell, we can do Beckhoff, we can do all types of codices, derivatives, I would say. And there we have customers, like I can name, for example, Henkel, that use it for exactly that. So now, first of all, was PLC Ops, the management of the existing PLCs. Once you,
And with management, what do you mean with management? Is it just like reprogramming the PLCs, or is it like changing the IP addresses in the PLCs? How would you describe it for a person coming more from the IT side, what you need to do at those PLCs? I mean, you could say, hey, the PLC, you just put it in and you leave it there like 10, 20, 30 years, just like this. I know it's there, like how people do it in pharmaceutical, or I think in steel also. They just put it in and then they forget about it. What would be cases where you manage it or reprogram it?
Yeah, first of all, this is what you express is the higher you get, the more you people believe productions never change. Actually, it changes all the time if you really double click it. And it might be simple things like I want another data point in via OPC UA that I can then analyze. That's a reprogramming action. Yeah? I have a motor that I need to exchange from one vendor to another. That's a reprogramming action. Then as a computer scientist, I have to say there's a lot of magic numbers in PLC programs, which is basically logic and data is mixed. That's not nice. You should not do it, but that's the reality. So process optimization, also very simple things are very often with programming.
Things that you would do an environment variable, now thinking from the IT perspective, where you have like Docker container and you have an environment variable, you would just change the environment variable, is something that's in PLC code is typically hard coded. Is that correct to say?
That's what we see more often than not, unfortunately. Changing the speed of a conveyor belt, for example. Yeah? What I did not mention is we have a connectivity stack and we changed the model how to interface to PLCs, because what we see, what the current predominant pattern is, that there is a layer 2 network, like a PLC network that's not connected, and then you have a VPN. And if a third party, like be the machine builder, be the system integrator, any type outside of your factory wants to kind of remote access the PLC, you give the credentials to. This comes to the point where we have customers that do not know who all has the credentials. If you change it and you do not know, you might exclude someone that you do not want to exclude. So they don't change it. That's an inherent security risk. We changed this. We have put a lot of effort in our secure cloud environment. Then we have a own, we believe, very secure, very innovative connectivity stack that easily tunnels through all types of firewalls. So it's easy to install. And then with also the ability to have the IDEs, like the Windows applications in the browser, every access is just defined by a user with a right. So we changed this completely from giving someone access to a network where you then do not know what that person does. You do not know from which computer with which other programs installed. You get to a clean, managed environment where you can have complete access rights and so on. Yeah? Which is a use case, for example, Henkel also uses for the machine builders. And that ultimately leads to less travel, less CO2, less cost, because the reality is that companies pay for PLC programmers to fly around the world. Yeah? And that's not a good use of human resource, but it's also not a good use of general resource in terms of CO2 emission and so on and of time. Yeah? And not forget the human factor of people being away from their families. Yeah? Which will be more and more important.
Okay, so what you do is you have, and I think this is really interesting, point of security and access control. What you're saying is traditionally everyone has like the root password with the PLC and everyone program it. And nowadays it's just to make the people move to your factory physically so that they can get access to it. And what you do is you make a connection to the cloud and then you put the IDE software into the cloud. You're basically solving multiple problems at once. One is that you need to run the software itself on a Windows PC, which might be inflexible. I've heard of some companies even they don't allow anymore to install software on their laptops. They're just going like browser-based only. So problem number one, you can now access everything with the browser. And then problem number two, you can give them continuous access. And then even problem number three, there's only the cloud has the connection. You can now exclude people or do access and rights management on top of that.
Completely, you can go much fine grain. You can say that person has read access to 3 PLCs on that network. The password and username of a PLC, actually, reality is most PLCs are not password and username secured. Yeah, because if you don't have a central repository, which we actually are, the risk that there is a production shutdown and you cannot access is quite high. But you can say, okay, there is a network and that person only has read access to 3 PLCs and write access to only 1 PLC. And we are just beginning. We can get this down to the level of granularity we want. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not easily understand because it completely turns the whole thing upside down, basically. But it's in line. If you want, you could then also have those users that you define. You can also link them to the response to the corporate directory. So if you, for example, have a third-party supplier for a project of 3 months, you can ensure that all access rights are cut after the project. Yeah? Or if a automation programmer moves from one factory to the other, that the passwords do not kind of proliferate. You have this piling up of access in persons. Yeah, that's something we have a lot of very good discussions with our existing customer base. Also, how to move that product forward. We now kind of really had a lot of discussion on PLC ops. Let me quickly guide you through the other two
Mm-hmm.
elements that we do. The one thing is those PLC programs are hidden in proprietary files that you need where you need a Windows application to open it. What we provide with what we call versioning, first of all, that you get away from this version management in file name. Yeah? We came across one customer that ran out of the file limit of 256 characters because they had everything in the file name. We've seen people that store the versions of PLC programs in SAP systems, all types of stuff. What we basically, first of all, build, okay, here's a PLC, these are the files that are deployed on it or attached to it, and then what's the versions of the PLC. File name is always the same, but you know exactly who has changed what when. By the way, also with which means, is it in a browser, was it uploaded, and so on. Very basic stuff. But still, it's a proprietary file you cannot log into. You can log into it with the IDE that we are able to have run in a browser, and then also can do everything you would do on a laptop. And you are, by the way, also physically connected to the PLC. Means you can push deploy. You can look what's happening on the PLC. But you also can just double click and then we decompose those files. We do this currently for Siemens and for Rockwell PLCs without the need of an IDE. You then see in a browser everything that's there. A PLC is a computer that does not even only have logic. It also has hardware components. It had data blocks to it. It had bus protocols to it, and so on. Like there's a huge part of that non-logic. We were able to, first of all, decompose it, make it readable. The languages to build logic are not only textual based. It's the 61131 is the ISO norm. There are also graphical languages. We cannot forget that in some areas of the world, there is graphical languages like one is called ladder logic. That's more like electrical logic lines, how you do electrical cabling in a cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very much used in North America. We can show that, and we cannot only show that, we can then also compare it to whatever version you had before. This ties back to what I say. We need to get the people where they are. They have no clue what's deployed on a PLC. They have no clue who did it. They first of all want to understand what's really the latest version and then what has changed. Yeah. With giving that ability to do this, you have also a couple of use cases. First of all, the risk of changing something goes down because you can always do a rollback. You can also immediately, what I did not say, we can deploy through PLCs and we can parallelize this. So you could do a complete rollback of a factory and you know what you do. That's the beginning of that versioning journey. There is already people that say, okay, we only program in textual languages and then we export and put this to Git. This is also something that we are exploring. Yeah? But that will not move the needle because it's only a fraction of the existing manufacturers and machine builders that only do textual languages. So first of all, we are kind of democratizing access to professional version control in the domain that's called 61131/4 with 5 different languages where only one is graphically based. That's version pro. So PLC ops, then version pro. And the last part is where we've spearheaded a while ago already, the uncoupling from hardware of the PLCs and the logic of the PLCs, where we partner with VMware and we're the first, to our knowledge, to put like only the software stack of PLCs. There's one company called Codesys. Others are now following, like Siemens, that provide soft PLCs that can run on x86, and then put them on top of real-time hypervisors in our case from VMware in the start, then get away from I need to buy those boxes to, hey, I can also buy a server and I can put 40, whatever number of cores minus one for housekeeping PLCs there, which eliminates the dependency on certain hardware providers. We've seen this in the Corona crisis in the last years, where due to the disruption of global supply chains, those PLCs were not available or had delivery times of up to 12 months. So if you're a machine builder and you build mechanical components that are controlled by PLCs, but the PLCs are not there, and you're only paid if a machine is working, for the time PLCs are not there, you make no revenue. Yeah? That's actually company threatening. Yeah? And this, we've seen this now once. Situation got a bit better right now, but we see how dependent factories and machines are on proprietary hardware. And I think therefore it's a good time to also explore that area of PLC virtualization.
And regarding the third part, it's something that interests me, and I've already spent some time on it, like getting into it. What you said by real time, because I'm personally interested in like how do PLCs, how they ensure real time. I know there is like a real time kernel patch for Linux, so that you can actually guarantee that a cycle is always done every 10 milliseconds or something, because the normal processor won't guarantee you this. This is at least like how I understood it. How would you describe it on a technical level? What's the real time is, and also how you then do it networking and then also with hypervisors? Would be good to get your input on this.
What is real time? Real time means just in time for a physical process. Yeah? Real time is that it's faster than the reaction time of the physical process. Real time in process industries, if a valve takes 3 minutes to close, like on an oil rig or whatever, yeah, real time can be 2 minutes. Yeah? It's really the guarantee that for certain time span that's required by the process, a certain logic is executed and outputs react to inputs. In discrete manufacturing, discrete is everything you can cut, yeah, from like a fighter jet to any type of consumer packaged goods. Yeah? Process industries, it thinks you cannot stop like a steel mill. Stop a steel mill, you need to reconstruct it, kill down, reconstruct it. But in discrete, what we found a sweet spot is around 10 milliseconds. Yeah. So you need to make sure that if you have a control loop, that you get way below 10 milliseconds so that you can ensure that the conveyor belt can work with a robot and what have you. So that's a requirement. In terms of the technology stack, obviously you need the logic that can be executed on a operating system, or if you go servers currently that that can run on a hypervisor with x86 virtual machine. As you said, the program itself is kind of tweaked in terms of how the processes in Linux are used, but then you really need a real-time operating system. As you said, there is now, I think, good evidence that certain types of Unix can reliably perform this, and former times companies like Backup have done the same with a Meta hypervisor, for example, for Windows. So that's also a problem. The second part is real-time hypervisors. This is where we always had real-time hypervisors from a variety of companies that are kind of very close to OT systems, like not very flexible in configuration or not so flexible in during runtime configuration. What we see now, what we saw is that the market leader in IT, VMware, came up with a very capable real-time hypervisor, E6i with a real-time patch. And then we just tested it out and found that it's way below 10 milliseconds. That's around between 3 and 5 milliseconds for quite sophisticated automation tasks. Then you still need to see how does the logic in a processor and in a software on a processor get to a 0 to 24 volt signal, which is where actuators are steered and kind of sensors get into a PLC through IOs. And in between that, you have feed buses. Those feed buses have names like Profinet or like EtherCAT. Yeah? And those feed buses have real-time requirements, yeah? Because they also need to deterministically kind of ship data. Yeah? Let's take EtherCAT. That's like every minute a bus comes by, yeah, and you need to jump always in the same seat, yeah, because you always have the same place in that protocol for an I/O signal to be transformed. Obviously, you need to get from the software PLC through the operating system to the hypervisor to the network interface. And this is where we spend a lot of effort to identify how that works. Yeah? And that would go way too far. But summing up, we've built a system that solves that problem, solves it reliably. We work with customers, they've tested it. And very important, it's also usable for the OT engineer. Coming back to IT should come to the OT system. Like once you've set it up, a virtual PLC and a real PLC in SDA are exactly the same. Yeah? You do not want to have a automation engineer that kind of spent the last 3 weeks in India to send them on a week on how to configure IT hypervisors. You want one tool where that can easily be done. And this is what we're building.
Okay, so coming from the IT side, and you said that you're bringing the DevOps part into the factory. As a IT person, or for IT persons, might be hard to understand, like, how is it working currently? I mean, this is like just so daily routine. You're using Git, you're using version control, you have an authentication, authorization system. How can all factories in the world run without it? So how does it work currently?
I'll give you a very concrete example, elevated to a higher level problem. First of all, car maker, if a model change comes on Friday, they close the factory, they shut it down, so nothing is produced. 70 people come in, they call it sneaker network. They work until Monday morning at 6. They run from PLC to PLC with their laptop. They have versions on their laptops. They have it there's a lot of different companies. They do changeovers. Like, let's say the car body changes just in width of 1 millimeter. Everything in that car manufacturing street needs to be adapted. Yeah.
Crazy.
And then some do some unit testing, some not. And then on Monday they start hard. And then they solve the problems in the running production until around Thursday. That's what we were told. We see similar patterns all over the place. So that's what happens. Basically, that thing is very often the problem of proper software control is very often in the heads of the automation engineers. Yeah? And by trial and error, that works because these are extremely capable people, and they take their job very serious. They have a high risk. But the question is, and now it comes to a higher level problem. Why do we put that risk on people? And the realization is that we have this motion in our head that manufacturing is stable. As you said, never changes ever. But what do we have in all other technical systems? Like Netflix has new features every day. Amazon pushes new features 3 times a minute. And this is now a couple of years old, my knowledge. Yeah? So, and these are not less complicated than modern factories. Yeah. So we need to build systems where you get away from no control to automated deployment to automated backup and undo, yeah? So that you de-risk it. Once you de-risk the changes will be more. More changes means more innovation, either in newer products or better processes to, for example, produce with less input factors. And that's our mission.
So you know our community, which consists mainly out of IT and OT architects who are like on this intersection between IT and OT, like trying to get data out of it. And there it's also about all the systems in between IT and OT, about backupping, etc. Mostly the community consists out of people like this. How can they benefit from using software-defined automation? How could they get, for example, started if they say, hey, this sounds great. I don't only want to have my enterprise IT and don't want to have also my everything in between IT and OT, but also want to have the OT all running the same DevOps way. So how can they get started?
So how they can start it is very simple. Go to softwaredefinedautomation.io, top right, click start free trial, and here's 2 weeks of free trial. Yeah? What you then need is your favorite PLC programmer. If you are not your PLC programmer itself, you need a small gateway with a Debian Linux, and then the gateway needs to have a connectivity to the internet and the PC on the other side. And then that's it. We say that can be done in a couple of minutes. We're also here to help anytime. To your specific question, software-defined automation for those people might be the perfect interchange ground between the people that program the PLCs, that run the machines, and the OT programmer. There's one thing that I did not mention. We are not building a closed-end software. Everything we do also is basically API'd. Yeah. Currently, for per use case, we're hardening those APIs. What we, for example, did once with colleagues from Amazon Web Services, within roughly 30 minutes, we helped them connect PLCs, put in a program, and then get the API, and then change the parameters in that PLC from a Python script in their AWS environment. Take any other environment. So, good example is you analyze data, and the data flows in via an OPC server on the PLC. You want to change what that PLC sends, could be an API to that, yeah. Or in the simplest way, you could just notify the PLC programmer because you know that it's also used on that PLC, yeah. Because you have access to the same view, you see exactly the same thing in a software-defined manner, rather than to need to call who is Joseph online for, yeah, in a nutshell. Yeah?
Yeah. So thank you for all of your insights and your expertise in the field of automation and cloud. To the listeners and viewers, wherever you might hear this on Spotify or on YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or to contact Josef from Software Defined Automation directly. You can reach him via LinkedIn, or you can just go there and try out the free version. If you have any feedback, feel free to put it here in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Josef.
Thank you, Jeremy.